Welcome to Hope in the Face of Cancer, where we share real stories of courageous people in their cancer journey. Today's guest is a leader, survivor, and powerful voice for change. Lilian Vanvieldt-Grey is a stage 3 breast cancer survivor and senior executive at Alliant Insurance Services. But her impact reaches far beyond her title. Her experience with breast cancer became a turning point, not only in her personal life, but in how she shows up as a mentor, change maker, and advocate. At Alliant Insurance Services, Lillian helped launch a cancer employee resource group, creating space for real conversations, compassion, and community in the workplace. That effort helped spark a meaningful partnership between Alliant and CanCare. She also serves as a leading advocate with the Susan G. Komen Foundation and was honored as Komen's Breast Cancer Survivor of the Year in 2018. Lillian is a bold voice for education, prevention, and equitable access to care. Her advocacy is deeply personal and profoundly needed. Lillian's story is one of courage, calling, and connection. Today, she shares how cancer shaped her purpose, what true support looks like, and why hope is something we build together. Lillian, thank you so much for joining us today on our show.
No, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. And I know our audience is really going to enjoy learning about your story. But before we start into the cancer journey, why don't you tell us a little bit about Lillian before your diagnosis?
I think like most, I was on the hamster wheel of life, running through, but not really being present. I think we oftentimes are so focused on what we haven't done and need to get done that we tend to miss, what's right in front of us and our blessings.
Yeah. I'm into that.
And I, from a focus standpoint, my family and my community, they were always, personally, that was really a big thing for me. That was one of my driving factors. And from a professional standpoint, I really was really worrying on climbing the corporate ladder, like so many, I include myself.
Absolutely.
Those that are climbing the ladder. But I didn't really put an emphasis on the rungs. I guess I'll say it that way. I didn't take time to ask myself, who am I holding on to get up, and who am I stepping on or using to support? Who's supporting me down below? And I think, prior to cancer, I didn't understand that as much as I do post-cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. Cancer certainly changes so much, including your perspective on life, I'm sure. I understand you had a cancer history in your family. So tell us a little bit about that. And was that something that you really ever personally contemplated?
No, that's to answer the question. I did not personally contemplate it. And that's actually one of the reasons why I'm such a big advocate for awareness, is that understanding the impact of cancer, or rather understanding the importance of screening and the importance of testing and others, really kind of relies on you understanding your family history.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, particularly people in the African American community, not always knowing about your family history is a really big detriment. My grandfather, my father, and 3 of his siblings had a very aggressive form of prostate cancer.
Wow.
And while my father survived his battle, he lost his prostate in the process, but he survived this battle with cancer. His siblings were not so fortunate. My grandfather wasn't so fortunate. And I saw them go through truly a horrific battle, and ultimately the demise. And I didn't understand the genetics of cancer, understanding what it meant when so many people in your life are doing something. But it's prostate cancer. I don't have a prostate.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but what I didn't understand was the BRCA gene, and I didn't understand that there's genetics behind cancer, and certain cancers are genetically inclined. And mine was an aggressive one that I got from my father because of his prostate cancer. Not understanding that really, even though I was in it, and I had been in it since I was about 16 years old, my grandfather got cancer. It was a part of my life, and I didn't understand what it meant.
Yeah.
And that to me was criminal. It was criminal. I also, didn't realize that it wasn't a coincidence that some people in my family were getting something that, and I didn't understand what that meant. And not knowing and not understanding the impact to me was just something I couldn't allow to happen to other people. Not want to do better.
Yeah. Knowledge is power, for sure.
Knowledge is power. Yeah.
Yeah. So hearing those words, you have cancer, it's like a dividing line sometimes, before cancer and after cancer. And even with your cancer history in your family, you can't quite be prepared for the moment that you hear those words. So, can you take us back to the day that you were diagnosed with breast cancer in 2017?
Ooh, that day is emblazoned in my memory.
I can imagine.
I remember sitting in the parking lot of the doctor's office and calling my mother. And I
Hmm.
just kept saying over and over and over. It was crazy. I guess I have cancer. I have cancer. I have cancer. And I couldn't process it. I just kept saying the same thing over and over and again. Meanwhile, while I was doing that and crying and just, my husband's with me, we got the diagnosis together. And it's our diagnosis because
Yeah,
cancer is not a individual it's a family
yeah,
diagnosis because it
that's
impacts
right.
everyone in the family. And he immediately started looking for, tools and resources because we were just completely out of our element. And I felt as if the world was closing in around me. You get a certain sense of darkness and of loss because you start immediately thinking you're going to die. Everyone thinks that
Right.
cancer is a death sentence. And for those of you listening on the phone today, listening, it is not.
That's right.
It is absolutely not a death sentence, but it really does challenge your mind. And that is
Yeah.
the part that I think people need to understand. Um, the loss of when you start thinking about what you think you're going to lose in this darkness and the loss, you really start thinking about loss of time.
Mm.
You start thinking about the things that you haven't accomplished and what you want to
Hmm.
do. And you realize in that moment, the most valuable gift we have is time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, in those early days, after your diagnosis, how did you process things? I hear a lot of people just kind of moving through the stages of grief, like, so quickly. Kind of what was that experience like from you from that time that you first heard those words for the few weeks as you started your treatment?
I think at first you're powerless, and there's a sense of hopelessness that can set in.
Yeah,
And I saw that happening around me. A lot of people, the
yeah,
uncertain finances,
yeah,
the fear of the pain, the fear of loss,
yeah,
just the
yeah.
fear, and fear just becomes gripping. Um, but for me, I believe that, and for most, you realize very quickly that you can do something about your diagnosis.
Mhm.
After a few weeks of getting, call back and we'll schedule and call back and, oh, someone will call you, you start to understand that I have to advocate. I have to,
Yes.
you have to take on, and very quickly you have to start to understand you have to care for yourself mentally and you also have to care for yourself physically because
Hmm.
how you eat and exercising and what you put into your body, both mentally and physically
Yeah.
and emotionally. So I guess that's not both,
Yes.
but mentally, physically, and emotionally. Once you settle into your new normal and you start to take back your power.
Mm.
And then at the same time, I found the Komen Foundation, and I talk a lot about Komen because it became a part of my family. It became my family. It
Yeah.
became my community because I didn't have aunts or uncles or anyone else well, I had uncles, but I didn't have anyone else that had gone through a breast cancer battle. I remember calling one of my very good friends, understanding that I had to have a mastectomy, but never having known anyone that had had a mastectomy.
Right.
And she was so gracious. One of her friends was also going through breast cancer, and she called and said, "Hey, would you mind sending her pictures just so she can understand what's going to happen?"
Right.
That is important. Those types of things, that type of community, that
Yes.
type of support, um, it's a whirlwind. And being able to just realize the power lies with you, and
Hmm.
that so many people that have come before you have gone through the battle and have been successful and have won. That gives you power. It empowers you to move forward.
That's right. And finding your community is critical, and that looks different for everyone. For you, your community became your relationship with Komen, and that allowed you to surround yourself with survivors. So you also have this now picture of like, okay,
It
these are
gives you
people who have
hope,
beat
and
this.
in a lot of ways, it gave me strength. And for me, CanCare is another example. Is that CanCare creates a community, and the ability for me either to be a volunteer, having come through this, and being able to give back, that gives you power,
Yeah,
it gives you strength, it
that's
gives
right.
you something to hold on to. But also being there for someone who may not know what's going on, or a family member, or a caregiver. I was a caregiver prior to being, I say now survivor and thriver, but prior to that, I was a caregiver, and it's hard. It's
Yeah.
daunting. It's painful to watch someone go through something and be powerless and not know how to make their lives better. So I think in a lot of ways, these types of organizations, CanCare being one of them, they have a vital role. They're
Yes.
important because
Hmm.
what you don't know. And
That's right.
there's a lot of people that, I know what I know and I know what I don't know, but they don't know what they don't know. And
That's
having
right.
people that there to help you and say, hey, mate, by the way, did you think about this? Or here's another type of treatment. Or you can do this. Or don't eat sushi because it's raw fish. Just a number of things that
Yeah.
the things I found out or the challenges I went through. And now in my new role, where people will call me up and I'm the one sending pictures, with a mastectomy.
Right.
Or I'm the one talking about that men can have
Yeah.
breast cancer and you need to pay attention to this. I'm the one talking about, hey, do you know if it's a genetic cancer, that this is what it means,
Yeah.
and
You're paying it forward.
paying it forward.
Yeah. So at the time of your diagnosis, you hadn't put all the pieces together about your family history. Kind of how did all of that come to be? Kind of the connection. When did you make that connection?
I made that connection when I went through my first meeting with the oncologist, and they started asking about your family history.
Mm, yeah.
And then, oh yeah, and I had an aunt actually that had passed away before I was born, my father's
Hmm.
sister, and she passed away from what they thought was stomach cancer, but most likely now it was probably breast cancer, but it was back in
Mm,
the 50s or something. Um, but I'm, as you can probably tell from this, I believe in community,
yeah.
and for me, I'm an emotional creature. I'm stronger because of my village. I
Yes.
immediately went to them. I mean, my mom was on the phone within, 10 minutes of that. But I found that by sharing, people were there for me in ways that I didn't even think was possible. And I had
Yeah.
never imagined the ways that they could be there for me.
Hmm.
And that is something that, when you are at your lowest point, having someone show up for you in ways that you had no idea was even
Yeah.
possible is another way where you're getting it's a mental boost. It's a mental,
Yes.
prescription, so to speak.
Yes. Well, and I think for strong women too, um, it forces some vulnerability, in you and forces you to accept the love and care of others surrounding you as well. So let's talk a little bit about your treatment. That's another area where you have to surrender some control. What was the treatment experience like for you, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually?
Intense.
Yeah.
Not surprising,
Yeah.
right? And really, it wasn't that physically that bad.
Mm,
But the uncertainty,
mm,
the fear of the fear
yeah.
of the unknown, the fear of the known. You see people talking about chemo all the
Yeah.
time. Chemo just by itself is just a terrible word. And even now, people don't realize that there are a lot of chemos that they have no problem. You can go back to work, but
Right.
everyone
Yeah.
has this thinking in their mind. And as a social being, I like being around people. I'm in sales and not being
Hmm.
able to be around everyone, not being able to, go out and just even going to the grocery store. You have to be very careful. And that was really limiting for me. What I ate, I love food and being able to just eat anything you want to eat and understanding the value and the importance of what you put into your body, what you put into your mind. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it was also empowering. I learned a lot about my illness. I sat down and started reading books, then the breast book, by the way, is a really good book for people who
Mm,
are newly diagnosed with breast cancer. Um, and I got myself ready for what I needed to fight. But the biggest
hmm.
tool, I think, was my will. My
Hmm.
biggest tool in my toolkit, my biggest tool in my toolbox was my mind.
Yeah.
And my will to live and my determination to not let cancer defeat me was always the thing that I put before anything else.
Yeah.
And I say, I got cancer. Cancer didn't get me. I have all these little sayings, but
That's right.
one of them, I tell myself that I get up in the morning, like, you got cancer, but cancer is not going to get you.
Hmm.
Because it's all about, and obviously it's trite, is that there's lots of things that come into play, medicine, the treatments
Yeah.
and what. But for a lot of cancers, particularly, stage one, stage two, stage three, you're in a place where your cancer you're still battling it and you still have an opportunity to prevail. And understanding that and not getting, not letting it take you to a place where you're in that sense of darkness and hopelessness, because that's when it wins.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned fear quite a bit. Sometimes I think that your biggest enemy in your cancer journey isn't the cancer itself, it's your fear. Yeah. And how that's not something anybody can prepare you for.
No, no.
Yeah. So, something really admirable about your story is you have really turned your personal experience into a mission. Um, you want people to be informed. You want them to fight. You want them to be their own best advocates. So tell us a little bit about that journey of really turning your experience into a personal mission through your work with Susan G. Komen.
Um, for me, cancer was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
But the support I got was also a game changer for me.
Yes.
Because what I realized very quickly was, today I came up with this thing. I had all these different things, which, my brain works, but one of them, and I still use it it's my mantra now, and I still use it. It's like, will it matter in 5 years?
Mm.
And I sit back and I say, now you go back and I challenge anyone thinking right now, go back and say, 5 years ago, what do you remember about 5 years
Yeah.
ago? What do
What
you
were you
remember
worried
about?
about?
What were you worried about in May of 2020? And most of you are going to talk about COVID, but you're
Right.
not going to talk about the thing that was on your desk at work. And you're not going to talk
Hmm.
about, the dry cleaning you didn't pick up, or you're not going to talk about the appointment you missed. And the things that we give ourselves that make us so worked up and so this and so that. And then you start to sit back and you really come down and granularly, what is it that matter to me? And almost always it's going to be family, friends, community, the things that really
Hmm.
matter. And if you understand that and you make that your foundation, you're really quite a ways towards having, the strength that you need to get where you need to go. Um, Seeing a lot of women that have gone through this, and if you ever go to any type of Komen walk or anything like that,
Hmm.
you have women that are holding up signs, 10
Yeah.
years, 17 years, 25,
Hmm.
whatever, 6 months. And for me, having, with my black nails and, my hair falling out, my hair is just falling out, bald and wearing a mask, even before mask, this would be, before mask.
Right.
And seeing people say, 25 and 100, whatever. And it's like, oh, wow, it just rows and rows and sees. It gives you the power to start to understand, okay, I can do this.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's, I think, tough for so many people going through the battle in the moment to kind of force themselves to kind of get out and put themselves in that environment. But
And
it's so good that you did that.
But you'd ask me, why I was doing, what prompted me to do that. And for me, it was, why should anyone have to go through this?
Yeah.
You talk about me describing fear and anxiety and angst and all those things that come with, the fear, the anxiety, the angst, the depression, the sadness. They're all emotions that I didn't like, but I had them
Yeah.
anyway. I
Yeah.
had them anyway, and I
Yeah.
realized that I had something that a lot of people don't have, and I have privilege.
Mm,
You hear the word privilege being used a lot these days, but I had financial privilege.
right.
I had an amazing employer that most people don't have anything that comes close to what Alliant did,
Yeah.
and how they supported me. My family, I'm from the Caribbean, I have a large family, and I had cousins chopping off their hair. I had girlfriends throwing me hat and
Mm,
scarves parties. I had, people sending me, one of the things that someone did early on was we got to have, I had a hat and scarf party. My girlfriends were like, you're going to lose all your hair. We know it's going to happen. So we're going to bring you hats and scarves, and we're going to tell you why we picked this particular hat or this particular scarf for you. Okay,
oh,
it was wonderful. It was a really great way
that's
to
beautiful.
sort of get me started in my journey. I still have all the hats and scarves. I got a purge.
Wow.
But but what came from that was they all at the time filled out cards, like little get greeting cards for me. And
Yeah.
then every couple of weeks, I get this random card in the mail.
Mm,
Like, hey, how you doing? This is me. You can do this. You got this. Like different things and Wonder Woman and this and that. And it once again, it was just this reinforcement, this support that was coming
yes.
and randomly and from nowhere. It doesn't have to be this magnanimous gesture. It's something
Yeah.
small, something simple, but understanding that you matter and you can do something.
Hmm. That's right. And for those that may not have that large family or friend network, understanding that there are places, whether that's, Komen or CanCare, or there's so many wonderful organizations where you can belong and you can have family and community, that is available to everyone facing cancer is such a beautiful thing today. That maybe when your aunt was diagnosed, maybe that wasn't quite the thing, but now it's like there's community everywhere if you just open yourself up to it.
I think the difference between, that was what's 50, 70 years ago. The difference is people thought that cancer was a curse
Yeah.
and, the C word. They wouldn't even
Yeah.
talk about it. And I remember one of my friend's father had stomach cancer when I was in the 80s. I was very young, but they had stomach cancer and people wouldn't go to their house to play with them because somehow they thought it was contagious and
Right.
not understanding, so you go from that to a place where now there's, there are all these pills and prescriptions and medications that you can take and you can work and whatnot. It's a different conversation.
That's
It's a,
right.
it's a different place. And if people start to embrace that and understand this is just, it's an illness
Yeah.
like so many other illnesses. And while this one it can be deadly, like so many other illnesses,
Yeah.
there's also an incredible success rate. There's also an incredible survivor rate. And
Yeah.
there's all these things that you can do from colonoscopies to mammogram. There are all these things that you can do to find out before it even happens.
That's
Genetic
right.
testing, you can know whether or not you were even, susceptible to something like that. Knowing that is empowering. And
That's right.
knowing that you can survive it is also really, truly liberating. And I think if
Absolutely.
people start to have the conversation that way, then it changes the narrative, it changes the discussion, it changes the trajectory, it changes, and so many more people will go out and get a mammogram. They won't think of it as being something that's
Right.
painful, which is not, by the way. I will say that one more time. Mammograms are not painful, and they saved my life, and they saved
Amen.
lots of lives.
That's
But
right.
but having that conversation, having a platform, having a podcast where you've been talking
Yeah.
about, that's what matters. And I go back to CanCare because this is what we're talking about, CanCare. And a lot of what I'm saying and what I'm talking about, hopefully people are hearing, it's that you can become the volunteer. You can be the
That's
person that
right.
I am, which is having the conversation with someone who doesn't have the community. You can become their community. Or if you're someone like me in the beginning, trying to figure out my next normal, you know, we'll get to the ERGs in a second. But one of the reasons we started our ERG was to create that thing right there over your shoulder, hope,
Yeah. That's
was
right.
to create a guidebook because
That's right.
there were many of us at our organization that had gone through a cancer battle or had someone like my father or others.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in college going to pick up my dad's cancer medication, and not understanding what am I getting? What's he have? Didn't even understand it.
Right.
But they're having a community and having, the resources. And that's what, CanCare does. That's what the purpose of it is. That's why it's valuable. That's why it's needed. Is you being able to create something for someone that doesn't necessarily have all the things that I have. I talk about it being privileged. It really is a privilege, but that doesn't mean people can't have the same.
That's right. That's right. So when you are speaking, when you're advocating today, what are some of the most important things that you want to get across to those that might be in your audience? What do you want them to know and walk away with?
Well, there are two people in my audience that are listening. One is someone who has no relationship really with cancer, like me before all of this. Even
Right.
though I had people in my family that had cancer, I
Right.
really didn't
Personally.
have anything, and nor did I think that I was susceptible to cancer. And I think for those individuals, what they should hear is that testing is important, knowledge
Yeah.
is important, and getting, and making sure you're getting your screenings is really, really,
Yeah.
really important. Um, I'll speak about one of my good friends who gave me permission to tell his
Yeah.
story. Um, During COVID, he was exercising, and I say he because I think it's an important story to tell. He was
Yes.
exercising, and he felt that one side of his chest was getting stronger and developing, and the other side wasn't. And he went and found out. He went to the doctor to find out what was going on, and found out that he had breast cancer. One, yes, men can get breast cancer, very important. Two, because he was doing something, and his mother had passed away from cancer the year before, him not understanding that, what that meant, or it actually wasn't genetic for him, but his mother passed away from cancer the year before. And what I am hoping that everyone understands and what I'm hoping everyone sees is that for that first group of people, make sure that you're doing whatever you can to give yourself a fighting chance, because you can either be one, you can be two, you can be three, or you can be four. And each one of those stages in cancer means something. And you want to try to do whatever you can to catch it as early as you can, because the survival rates are tremendous. 100% survival rate, stage one. So you can do that. The second thing, for the group of people who are going through the battle and who are, facing their new normal, as I call it, understanding your inner strength and understanding the why me? And I say, why not you?
Yeah.
The time you say, why me? Then you should say, why not me? What makes me so special that I shouldn't be the one that, that isn't given another, why me? Why not you? And if it's going to be you, then what are you going to do about it? Because it's going to keep moving. So now the question is, we have a battle, and either we can stop and say it's won, or we can move forward, we can fight it. And if you're in the second set of people, which your new normal is that you've got to fight breast cancer, you've got to fight any type of cancer, arm yourself with information and arm yourself with confidence, and go into this knowing that you've got this.
Yeah. We talk a lot about being your own best advocate in your cancer journey. What did that mean for you? What did that look like for you?
Oh, I was a hot mess. My husband and I talk about Douglas a lot, because he is and continues to be a very amazing individual, and certainly someone that was there for me. But we started off by saying, okay, got the breast book, started reading, started understanding what type of cancer I have, what does it mean. I did genetic testing, and then I met with everyone in my family, all my first cousins, and gave them my test results and told them what they needed to do so they could start getting tested. By the way, and it pains me to say this, I talked to, at the time, two of my uncles were still alive that I say died from prostate cancer. Mm-hmm. One of them had beaten prostate cancer, and so he was in remission. And the other had prostate cancer, but he had there's two types of prostate cancer. There's an aggressive form, just like there was a breast cancer, and there's one that will probably not kill you before you die. A lot of older men get it. And even though my uncle knew that this was going to be a problem, he didn't do anything about it. Yeah. And both of them ended up passing away. And for me, I want to make sure that people see that don't take this lightly. But also don't let fear overtake you doing anything.
Yeah.
Because in both of those cases, they didn't have to die.
Yeah.
They didn't have to die had they just gone and gotten tested, had they just gone and gotten treatment, and not put their head in the sand and say, oh, no, I don't want to hear it because, X, Y, or Z. They didn't have to die.
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful. That's powerful. So you mentioned Alliant. And so Alliant Insurance Services is your employer. Start with when you were diagnosed. You talked about just how supportive they were. And for those listening who are part of companies or who are leaders in companies, I think they can learn a lot from what Alliant did for you. And then let's, talk a little bit about how that's evolved and grown in the organization. But first, how were they supporting you in this time?
Cancer impacts so many people in an organization. I think people forget that. When you say cancer, it's like, 10% of our population has cancer. That may be true. Probably in most cases, probably about 10% of your population, somewhere around there, has some form of cancer, and they're dealing with it or battling it or in or out of treatment and whatnot. But there's a whole lot of other people who have that are caregivers.
That's right.
There are a whole lot of other people who, have family members that are, or friends. They may not be caregivers, but, my best friend has this, or, my significant other, or someone I just met and I'm in love with them, and now this is happening.
They're impacted by it. Yeah.
They're impacted by it. And those individuals suffering from the disease, whether you love them or they're just coworkers or whatever, they're at work, and they're probably half of your population. If half of your population is dealing with something, how is you as an employer going to ignore that?
Yeah.
And if you want to help, people always talk about you want your employees to bring their whole selves. You ask your employees to bring their whole selves to work. And as an employer, if you want to support their well-being and their mental health, creating support groups for them and creating a space for them and creating a place for them to be able to deal with it, to understand the resources and to have the tools in the toolkit is, I think, as an employer, it's required.
Yeah. Yeah. And Alliant really
They
is
see that.
walking the walk there.
They see that.
You mentioned, the ERG. So for those listening, if you aren't familiar with that terminology, an employee resource group, and explain, what what an employee resource group is, and then talk a little bit about ARMS specifically.
Our ARMS group is our cancer support group, and an employee resource group is a group of individuals or allies who identify with a particular community. I use the word community a lot, but it's what it is. It's a community.
Yeah.
And our ARMS ERG was really formed right around 2019, I believe, really because we started to see so many of us that were dealing with it, and we wanted to create a resource or a tool book or a toolkit to help others, and also just having something foundationally that as an organization we could support people, our team. It means something when you are going through something like, oh, today I don't feel really well, or today I had a bad bout of chemo or something, and as an employer understands that. Or I got to take my father or my mother to this appointment because today the oncologist is going to tell us where we are. And as an employer, you understand what that means.
Yeah.
It's just you have a better operation, and you have a better workforce, and people are more willing to work harder for you because you work for them.
Yeah, you care.
You care. I CanCare, right? You care. It means a lot, I think, and I'm sorry for using words over and over again, but I think that when something works, then go ahead and use it. And for me, partnership is important. And ERGs are there to really serve as a partner to the employees, but also as an ally to employees, and being ways of awareness and opening up a community. So for a lot of individuals, you may say, okay, well, I don't have cancer, but I can support someone that does. I can write a card. I can be part of that card writing campaign because this is my colleague or my coworker whom I care about and I miss them. And letting them know that you miss them can mean a lot. So as anyone's listening and talking about, what can we do as an employer, or why is it important for an employer to even care about something as like cancer, sit back and say, I'm asking my employees to bring their whole selves to work. And I'm talking about all these different programs and tools that I'm giving them health insurance. I'm giving them vacation time so they can have mental health. And, why not give them a support group? Why not give them a resource to be able to come together and share their fears, their concerns, and giving them the tools to help them be able to navigate something that is incredibly painful and deeply personal.
Yeah. So what does that look like exactly? For those that may not be able to envision, kind of how would you put an employee resource group together activated around people facing cancer or caregivers? What does that look like? What does it do?
That's a difficult question to answer. And honestly, it's a difficult question to answer because it really, for any one individual, your ERGs are going to be just they're an extension of who you were as an organization. But an employee resource group, as for the most part, are people who have come together. In our group, in our organization, it's voluntary. We created the ERGs with the goal of having communities. And then we opened up those communities and said, if you want to be a part of this community, you want to be an ally in the community, and then allow those individuals to come together to build out their mission statement. Each ERG has their own mission statement. Particularly for ARMS, it is to be a resource and to be a support. And that mission statement then drives what we're doing. It drives us going out and finding CanCare. And we tried to do it ourselves, by the way, which we found to be incredibly difficult.
Well, we love being your partner.
It was incredibly difficult. So trust me, CanCare really filled a really important need for us. But also knowing that it was impacting our communities and our constituents, as an employer, your constituents are your workforce. Our constituents, our workforce, the impact of them and being there as a resource for them and being there as a positive. Could you imagine what that means for someone who's battling something like that, to know that I don't have to worry about whether or not I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about my employer treating me this way because I'm ill. I don't have to hide this. That's one less thing that they have to deal with. That's one
Yeah.
more thing that's giving them strength. Be that person.
Yeah.
And then you asked the specific question about how to get it started. You really need to have probably about at least 10 individuals that are willing to do this. You need to have a leader and a co-leader. You should have some tool or process within your organization to help them. We actually have individuals that are there to help manage our resource groups. There's one individual who helps them, with meetings and things like that. There should be a budget where they're giving a certain amount of money and tools to help them, but really giving them the autonomy to be able to create
Yeah.
their own space and giving them the autonomy to go out and have it be this way and do these things. So I think every ERG and every cancer ERG will be different, but the foundation is the same. Support
Yeah.
group, tools and resources, and a caring employer.
Well, I sure hope that many other organizations take Alliant's lead in creating, I mean, ERGs are not new, but honestly, when we met Alliant, having a cancer ERG was new. I mean, you guys, I really think we're on the front end of this. And we're certainly telling many other companies about what y'all are doing, because, what an amazing asset to your employee base. What an amazing way to say that you care. And I know a lot of people, one of the fears, as we talk about fear a lot in this cancer journey, one of the fears is, how do I tell my employer? Should I tell my employer? How will it impact my employment? And so you all at Alliant have created this environment where when someone gets that diagnosis, there's no fear in sharing that, because they know that they have a warm and welcoming community surrounding them. And you're also creating community. We talked about community, whether or not you might have a big family or a support network, Alliant's become that for your employees as well. So it's just a really beautiful thing. And I know I hope to see so many starting groups like you have started. So we talk about at CanCare, and some people think it's a little crazy at first, the gift of cancer. And I think when people first hear that, they're like, are you crazy? But you get it if you've been there. What was the gift that cancer gave you?
Yeah, it's funny. You may think that it's a crazy question, but I always say it.
Yeah.
I go around saying that cancer was a gift because again, it's all about framing, right? You get to
Yeah.
you get to frame anything, but it gave me strength and it gave me purpose. But most importantly, it gave me a vision, but into seeing what I was capable of being and what I was capable of doing. It brought my inner self to the
Mm-hmm.
forefront.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, I now can look at a flower or a tree and say, wow, that's a beautiful green.
Mm.
Or, or I can, I see someone who I haven't seen in a very long time. And I can remember, like when I met you, this is the feeling I had about meeting you. You no longer take things for granted.
Yeah.
You no longer take it. And when you don't take things for granted and you start to see the value and you start to see, then you understand your value.
Yeah.
And you understand your worth. And it's a gift. It's a gift to get to a place where you know you're a thriver. You can,
Mm-hmm.
and hey, I beat something that is, a really tough thing to beat, and I did it. So if I can do that,
That's
bring
right.
it on. Bring it on. What else you got for me? What else you got for me? Right? And that's a gift. That is not a gift. A lot of people are
That's right.
usually like, oh my God, this is happening to me, and why me, and blah, blah, blah. And then you all of a sudden find out, like, okay, this is happening. This is happening. And why me? Okay, why not me? Let's make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that is empowering. And you can
Yeah.
view it in a number of ways, but I view it as a gift.
When it's about choosing how to respond to something, right?
Mhm.
And I think you're such an inspiration that you can encourage those who might be facing that diagnosis or hearing those words. And you're planting a seed about, you can choose how to respond. You can take this and not be defeated, but you can take this and be more powerful. And this can give you purpose in your life. You can impact so many different people's lives through your own journey. And that's so powerful.
Yeah. And I don't, don't want anyone to walk away thinking like, oh my goodness, she's just like, oh, she's this and she's that, whatever. I don't know how I sound at this point, but um, what I will say is that I definitely had my moments of doubt. I definitely had my absolute fear. I had all of those things, and particularly in the beginning, because you don't know what you're going into, you don't know
Yeah.
what to expect. Like the first day of chemo was probably the worst day of my life. Second to the day I had my mastectomy, which was, I cried for hours. So I
Hmm.
don't, please, I'm not trying to make anyone think that I'm running around saying like, oh, I'm saying that, okay, that happened. Now what?
Yeah.
And I finally was able to get to a place, and I got there relatively quickly, but now what? And you talked about like, what did I do for advocacy? My husband and I, we went everywhere. We looked up, we researched, we went and met with, whatever. But the one thing that I will say for everyone to do, and it was important that I did it, got a second opinion, and
Yeah.
not because to find out whether or not I had cancer. A lot of people will tell you, I tell them get a second opinion, and they're so anxious to get started with their treatment that they don't even, I don't need to. I already know I have it. Oh, yeah, whatever. I'm not suggesting you get a second opinion for that. You get a second opinion for the treatment
Hmm.
and how you're going to go
Yeah.
about treatment. And I say that because we went and met with a specialist in San Francisco, um, and she did a breast cancer specialist. And the treatment that they had given me was going to be effective and it was going to work. But her commentary was, I think it's fine. Yes, you do have cancer. Yes, you need to have this treatment, but don't do it this way, because if you do it this way, it's going to be really hard on your body and you're going to have all these problems and and you can do it this way. And she changed and recommended the way that, and I went back and had a conversation with my physician about, hey, this doctor's saying this, and what about we do these changes, and why do you want to do it this way? And that conversation led to me having a different treatment protocol and how they gave me the medication, which
Mm-hmm.
really, comparison to other people, made my battle a lot more palatable. So I
Yeah.
think the advocacy portion of it is important, but also understanding that you don't just fall into, oh, they said this.
Yeah.
No. You need to at every point in time say, okay, well, okay, have you tested me genetically? When is that going to happen? What type of cancer do I have? Know the type of cancer you have, because
Hmm.
there's not a one type of cancer. There's lots of different
Yeah.
variations of cancer, and those variations have different treatment protocols. Information is power. And I don't want
Yes.
anyone to feel as though I'm suggesting that, I'm this like was great. It wasn't that. It was that I got a lot of information, which made
Yeah.
me really powerful.
Well, it also makes you more powerful in the process. You're not just receiving, you're not the recipient of this. You are an active fighter. So I think just that process of going about, whether it be getting second opinions or doing your research, it empowers you. It makes you, part of the process and part of the solution. I think that's very powerful. It's your own personal advocacy with your treatment.
Yeah.
So, for those who may be listening, who maybe just heard those words, you have cancer, what would you want to leave with them today?
You have cancer. Next.
Yeah.
It will be what you make it.
Mm.
And not everyone is going to survive, but not everyone survives a car crash either. And understanding that you have cancer. Okay. Next. What are we
Yeah.
doing next? If you spend all your time in the I have cancer portion, then you never get to the I beat cancer portion.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Thank you. I know there are many who need to hear that today. So thank
Yeah.
you, Lillian. I so appreciate you sharing your story, your message of hope. You are an inspiration. And I thank you for sharing your story, for being an advocate. I thank Alliant for just leading the way and giving us a model that we can follow about how to support those in our community who have cancer as well. So thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. And I want to, as you're talking about this journey
Mhm.
and CanCare, I want to thank CanCare. It is not for the faint of heart to try to do something as significant as what you guys are trying to accomplish. And it is my pleasure to do whatever I can to support it, because I really do believe in the mission. Your mission statement, which by the way, I encourage others to read, is, it's a call to arms. And it's a call to arms for those that have gone through this to be able to be there and to show and to light the path for others to follow. But it's also a community. And you've heard me say the word community over and over and over and over, because
so important.
community matters. And once you can find a community, and for those of us that were fortunate enough, and I say privileged, to have one, that's great. But even still, I still found another one with Komen. But for others who may not have that, being able to have something like CanCare is truly a game changer. So thank you all for what you're doing. This is something absolutely no problem.
Yeah, I think it's so important for everyone to know that cancer is not just a physical journey. It is an emotional, it's a spiritual, it's a mental journey. And so making sure that you equip yourself with the resources you need for your whole self is so important. So that's what we're here for. And I'm so thrilled to see that that's what Alliant is doing as well. So thank you for that. And if you or someone you love is facing cancer, CanCare is here to support you. Visit us at cancare.org to learn more. And until next time, remember, there is always hope in the face of cancer. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hope in the Face of Cancer, a survivor by your side. If you or someone you know is facing cancer or is supporting a loved one through their journey, we invite you to share this podcast. Thank you for your support in our efforts in the cancer community. No one should face cancer alone.